Good evening. Let me call this March 15th, 2016 meeting of the Planning Commission meeting to order. Item 2, land use items for discussion and possible action. TR in-score alternate compliance and warrant PZ 16-2070, requesting review and approval of an alternate compliance and warrant at the property addressed at 406 South Hester Street to allow changes to design requirements of form-based codes. Patty?
Good evening, Patty Evans, Development Services. This is the property that we are discussing tonight, shown in the hatched area. It encompasses almost a whole city block. This is Fifth Avenue, that doesn't go all the way through, so it does stretch down to Fifth Avenue. This is Fourth, here's Ramsey, and this is Hester. We have 6 design items that we're going to be talking about tonight. The 10-foot setback for the 5th floor, the garage design, the window height, the base, the expression lines, and the metal canopy. And that metal canopy may go away depending on the garage design later, which we will go into later. All right, we're starting with the south elevation. There is not a through street through there. 5th Street would be along there if it went through. So this is the parking garage. It's open, doesn't have to be screened since it doesn't face the street.
Can I make a question and or comment to
Yes.
that? It can easily be seen from 6th Street.
Well,
In my opinion, it should be covered.
there is another development that is proposed to go in south of this, and it's I believe it may be 4 stories high, which is what the parking garage is. So that may be some information that you want to consider.
I'm already aware of that.
Yeah.
I live in the Prime Place Apartments where development was supposed to be going north of that, and we have an ugly garage that faces the university.
Exactly.
I'll be interested as we go forward through this.
Okay. On the southwest corner, we have an open area that has apartments above it. This is a drive that goes back to this area. This is where the trash will be. The bicycle parking is in the garage. There's a room, separate room for the bikes. And this is the entry to park the bikes. And then on the west elevation, I'd like to point out that there is a grade change at how it kind of dips down right here and then starts coming back up. What they are calling as a base are these exposed concrete that's right under the windows here. And as you can see, it doesn't follow through those 18 inches. The reason for that is, I think will become clearer once you see the north elevation, and I'll go into that. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So this is the north elevation. I'd like to tell you that the planned materials for this is brick, stucco, solid metal panels, and perforated metal panels, and metal shingles. This is on 4th Avenue, which is one of our major streets in the form-based code area, as it's going to be our pedestrian way to connect the OSU to the downtown area. Here is the cutout that I showed you on the west elevation. This is a retail or commercial site with all the windows here, and there is a little patio type thing, so if they have like a little coffee shop or something, they can have outdoor seating. On the other corner is another cutout that has a patio, and that patio is for the residents' use only. It's not open to the public. In the middle here, we have the lobby and the rental offices that are walls of windows. On the east side, we do have the base, the concrete base under the windows, but as we go across, if you'll notice that this building drops down, and the first floor apartments are partially below grade. And that's the reason why that concrete does not go all the way across as the base of the building. Also, the windows are not 18 inches above the ground level like the code requires, and because it is partially below grade, they cannot raise those windows because the windows have to be a certain size according to the building code. They do there is like a 8 to 9 foot drop from east to west, and that's why they had to alter the buildings and build 2 buildings. The code also requires a 10-foot step back for the 5th floor, and this area is supposed to be how the buildings relate to the public realm and be more of a human scale. So all of these things have to do with that human scale of the public realm. That setback of that 5th floor keeps a taller building from looming up above you, like this middle picture here. This is the picture from the code, a graphic from the code. And if you'll notice that it goes up 4 stories, steps back. If you have a taller building, then you're supposed to go 3 stories and step back, and 10 is the maximum height. So they don't have that 10-foot step back. They are trying to address it in different ways by having portions of the building recessed, by having some balconies interspersed across the front, and the required 42-inch high parapet is recessed back from the main facade. Also on this middle photo, and I know you can't see it very well, but this darker line right here, and that says expression line. And you're supposed to have a very strong expression line above the 2nd floor, and that can be a change of color, different materials, anything like that to make a real pronounced expression line to bring the scale of that building back down to pedestrian-friendly height. What they are suggesting is the expansion joints. This is stucco. The white and the orange is stucco, and the gray is brick. So they are suggesting that the expansion joints between each floor that follows across the front are the expression lines.
The expansion joints in the brick are the expression lines? Is that what you're understanding what they said?
Yes, and I don't know if you can see on this, but there are some that are slightly darker on that brick, and I don't know if that means that that's going to be a different color, or if they were just showing where.
So they're here tonight, and we can ask them more detail.
Yes. Okay. Oh, and this first photo here is to demonstrate the base, or the 3 components of a building. Like this has a strong base, then you have the body, and then you have the cap. And this photo on the right is shows the expression lines and how it's whiter, it's different color than the main portion of the building. This is a perspective view at 4th and Ramsey. This is Ramsey and this is 4th. You can see a little better the recessed areas of the building. You can see the balconies. The metal, they're using perforated metal panels for the balcony railings. these little boxes around some of the railing, or around some of the balconies, that's metal clad and I believe metal shingle. The east elevation, again, this is the cutout on the northeast corner. That's for the residents. And you can see more balconies with the metal cladding around it. And then to the south, this is the garage. And that's one of the things that we need to talk about is the design of the garage. The code says that all buildings on one site have to be similar in architecture, in materials, and in architectural style, color scheme, and building materials. This just didn't relate to the rest of the building and look like the architectural style and so forth. Even though these are the perforated metal panels, and they look like sheer walls of metal, and they just didn't relate. This is a perspective at 4th and Hester. This is Hester, 4th, and you can see the garage here and how the rest of the building looks in this. This is a photo of the original design. Actually, the panels, I understand the panels are supposed to be lighter than what was on those elevations and perspectives, so they sent me this to illustrate that. They've also provided two options for the design of the garage. This is option 1. They're still using the perforated panels, but they have put spaces in between them to make more of a horizontal element and not have such a strong vertical element. And they line up with the floors of the building. They have removed the canopy, which is what the warrant was for. So depending on what you decide on this garage, that warrant can go away, or you can approve or deny or whatever. And option 2 does away with the metal panels. They do have the steel cables on each floor for the safety, but they have used the cladding that they use on some of the balconies here on this portion and around the entrance to the garage. Our findings include, number 1, the alternative compliance and warrant are required to permit the design changes of the proposed development. Number 2, the proposed design does not incorporate the required 10-foot step back on the 5th floor. Number 3, the design and large use of one material does not relate the garage to the principal structure. Number 4, the 18-inch base and window height is difficult due to the approximate 10-foot elevation change in a portion of the building being below grade. Number 5, the proposed structure does not have a strong expression line above the 2nd floor. Number 6, the architectural metal rods located over the garage opening are interpreted as an awning. And number 7, discussion with applicant should provide means, methods, materials to comply through these alternative ways. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant present, or the applicant's representative?
Yes, I'm the architect.
Would you come on forward and make whatever statements you so desire?
I appreciate that.
If you would, before you begin, state your name and address, I'd appreciate that.
I'd be happy to. My name is Steve Droll. I'm an architect with Valerio DeWalt Train Architects in Chicago, Illinois. 500 North Dearborn, Suite 900 to be specific. I'm going to navigate back to one of the renderings to start. I think it's best to talk about architecture and look at three-dimensional images, talk about the design intent and how we got to where we are. It's tough in floor plan and in elevations. If we had a chance, I think an elevation would, or a floor plan would help describe how we organize the building, but nevertheless, I think a rendering will really talk to the architectural aspects. I want to back up just a second. It's great to be in Stillwater again. It's great to be in front of all of you, and I thank you for having us here today. Stillwater was actually my home from 1992 to 1995. I attended Oklahoma State University, got my master's degree, and completed in 95. So it's great to come back. This project's been quite an odyssey. We've been working with Patty, the planning department, the building department for about 18 months.
So you got your degree here in architecture?
I did.
Did you have Nigel Jones as a
Did.
professor?
Yeah.
So he's the university
I was
architect.
his TA.
All right.
He's the
I'm not an
architect.
architect, but I talked to him earlier today, and so some of my comments are going to be from my discussions with him.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. That'll be great. I wish you were here. We were actually in front of the board, the variation, what's the name of the board?
Board of Adjustment, yeah.
Board of Adjustments, about 18 months ago. At one point, before the form-based code was adopted, this building sort of had a different life. It was 9 stories, it was 100 feet tall, and just due to construction costs and other reasons, we had to change the design to help it move forward. So, I mean, we've seen the evolution of the form-based code. It's actually been a great dialogue with Patty and her team, seeing that, you know, adopted and now working with it. We've probably been to Stillwater a handful of times, and it really has been a great dialogue. And I welcome any comments you have here today. So, you know, one of the major changes to the building design is that it has gone from a 9-story, 100-foot tall building to a 5-story, 60-foot tall building. And as a designer, and I think about how to deal with architecture and form and how it relates to people and pedestrians, my approach to a 100-foot tall building is drastically different than a 5-story building. And so when we think about this as a building in the T6 transect, which is designed or allowed to go up to 100 feet tall, 10 stories, I think it's written as, there's no doubt the needs for step backs are critical for a building that has 0 setbacks or allowed to have 0 setbacks. A large street wall that's 100 feet tall is going to be pretty imposing. There's no doubt about it. So as we started to redesign the project, being a very large parcel that is a full city block, thinking about pedestrians working their way to campus, walking up and down Hester, walking along 4th Street to where, you know, restaurants and bars and other things will be. We were thinking about that lateral experience and this very long street wall. We have almost a 300-foot frontage along 4th Street. And while the building is lower and we've done certain things to help break it down horizontally, we were worried about that experience as somebody walks along a 300-foot long building. So what we've done, as any designer would likely do, is try to apply and respond to all aspects of the code, but develop a hierarchy from what we thought was really important from that pedestrian experience standpoint and how it relates to city and the university. So as really a hierarchy, we've taken that long facade and per the form-based code, broken it into no longer than 60-foot sections. And so that's what you see here as an experience starting at the corner to another sort of mass, if you will, another mass that helps frame the entry and then working its way along the facade. That continues around the corner as well. So that was the first thing we did. And then we used a different material as well. We didn't just try to vary color, but we wanted it to be a material change, a textural change, things that helped it relate to the city and the neighborhood. So I've got a representation of what, it's always hard in a computer rendering, but to give you an idea of at least what our basis of design is. So on the far right-hand side is the brick we're thinking about using and currently being priced.
So that brick is going to be the paste on brick?
I'm sorry?
Is the brick going to be full brick?
Full brick. Yeah. So it's really what's called a utility size brick, so it's a little larger format. So it's nominally 12 inches long, 4 inches tall, and a full 4 inches deep.
Okay.
So it's full brick veneer. It's not the glue-on stuff, kitty corner from us, and we're well of all the technical problems that go along with
Yes,
that
I'm
product.
familiar with that very much.
So the other primary building material then is stucco. So what Ramina's got up here, Ramina's the project manager on the project. She's with Valerio Duval Train. I should have mentioned too, with us is Jason Tompkins representing the development group. So sorry about that. We've got representatives from the whole team here. So the idea is the stucco and the brick are the primary building materials, and then to comply with the form-based code, we thought about accents, not only in color but in material as well. So again, working along these long facades, to break up the brick and stucco, there's a series of recesses that there will be stucco with an accent material. Happening frequently at these recesses, we've grouped balconies together and we've created these sort of picture frame to help create this repeating architectural element that is talked about in the
How
form-based
far
code.
does it recess back?
So the total balcony depth would be 5 feet. So I'll get to when I talk about the step back in a second. What we've done is we've projected those 3 feet. So what you see here is the frame that I'm highlighting with the cursor projects from the main building facade 3 feet and then steps back to what's in orange here at the balconies 2 feet. Did I have that right, Renee? That's correct. Yeah. So for a total of 5 feet, which is a required depth from an accessibility standpoint for balconies, so somebody could get out there in a wheelchair. That's sort of a minimum dimension, and we've worked with that. So I've touched on some of the key aspects of the design and what we really focused on architecturally. There's no doubt oh, thanks. Well, if we need to, we can pass them out in a second. Thanks, Kelly. I think I'm going to use this rendering primarily. There's no doubt the one aspect of the form-based code that we deviate from and we don't adhere to either literally or figuratively is the step back. So at the 5th floor, we do not have a step back. We studied it. To be honest with you, if we were to step the building back 10 feet at the 5th floor, that would compromise all the units around the perimeter. They literally would have to go away. That 10 feet is the depth of the bedrooms and the living rooms. Those units just don't exist. So there's a development aspect to it, but again, thinking about how a 5-story building relates and you apply a new form-based code and the intent of that code that was written for a maximum 10-story building and how that works with a 5-story building, what we've tried to do through the recesses, through a continuously set back parapet that is back 5 feet from the projection or 2 feet from the primary building facade, helps create that relief in the other dimension that we've worked so hard to create in the primary direction. So that deals with the step back primarily. The issues about horizontality or the horizontal expression lines, or the 18-inch base, in our opinion, we've tried to respond to. But again, giving a hierarchy to that vertical break, what we've done is, I think even architects and designers like to squint their eyes, kind of look for the overarching concept. If Nigel was here, he'd probably be doing that now. What we have are continuous datum lines around the project that may not be a ribbon or a racing stripe all the way around the building, but create a datum line that residents
and Nigel liked that line up there that was a pedestrian scale.
That's right.
He liked the glass and then not the glass, so you felt like the building was not.
That's right. So even if there isn't a literal racing stripe around this building, we've established datum lines that go all the way around that anybody that walks along the building will perceive as a horizontal expression. Likewise, the cap of the building, where we've used an accent color. Is it at the 2nd floor? No, but there is certainly a horizontal element that is secondary but present, but again, reinforcing the breaks across the building. Same thing for the for the bays. I think Patty did a pretty good job explaining it for us. There is a challenge. I mean, Stillwater's flat, Illinois is flat, but there's still a 10-foot fall across 4th Street from Hester, which is high, down to Ramsey, which is low. We've got about a 10-foot, 9 or 10-foot fall across the site. We've actually used that to our advantage. And again, thinking about the step back requirements and the idea that we're trying to break down the scale architecturally for pedestrians, what we've done is used that to our advantage and taken 2 courtyard buildings and offset them vertically about a central axis, which is the main circulation corridor in the building. So that way, anybody that looks at the building from the university, looking back south, will see this break in scale. Anybody that walks along 4th Street will experience that change in scale. So in many ways, in our opinion, even though there isn't a literal setback, that break in building form helps break it down so it isn't just an imposing wall to the pedestrians. Likewise, what we've done, and Patty hinted on this, you know, the floors inside the building are obviously flat and the ground moves. So in some cases, we have articulated a true 18-inch base below the windows. In others, because the grade is moving and we're up, sometimes it isn't 18 inches. And that variation, we expressed the way, it's really hard, this is a low-res image. You can kind of see it here. What we've done is we've expressed the exposed concrete foundation below the openings as a resident walks along. So there is a different material, there is a different expression at that pedestrian level for somebody as they walk by. But again, it's more about those windows and that expression in the overall form as opposed to a continuous horizontal base. So that deals with the 3 main components as they relate to the building: the step back, the horizontal expression lines, and the 18-inch base. There's some discussion, or there was some confusion about our awnings and we had like sort of these sort of canopy things that were on the corners. You can kind of see them here. In our opinion, the form-based code talks a lot about reinforcing the corners. We're fortunate this building is a full city block. It's got 2 great corners. We've done everything we could to make those architecturally significant and allow pedestrians to participate in the architecture. This one in particular is at 4th Street and Ramsey, so the retail piece will be set back, allowing the building to provide cover. If that ends up getting rented to a Starbucks or a Subway shop, it allows people on their bike to sit out in an outdoor cafe or something along those lines. At the other corner, it brings the residents of the building out of the building and allows them to participate with activity on the street through a little outdoor seating area where kids can hang out and read and study or do whatever they need to do. But what we've done about the trellis and that variant, we've actually just removed them from the building. So that item is no longer a thing. I think they did create a little bit of architectural detail and sort of enhance the scale, but it seemed like that was a larger uphill battle than anything else. So they're just gone. It's really no longer an issue. The last thing we should talk about is the garage. And so
Before you get to the garage, the expression lines being the joints?
Yes.
When you caulk in the joints, would that be a different color is what your idea, or?
No, you know, my goal is to detail them deep enough that they read as a shadow. So in reality, you know, a joint in stucco is not very deep. It might only be a 1/2 inch deep. A rate control joint in brick is equally going to be only that dark. You know, it's hard, it's washed out on the screen a little bit, but.
So most of the time you won't really see it.
It's a more subtle detail, there's no doubt. I mean, I think just as you read the joints in between these panels, a similar material, that's how I envision the control joints in the stucco. So I think for somebody, a pedestrian that's walking by, will experience that texture and that breakdown of scale, but it isn't the racing stripe that is viewed from 2 blocks away.
Is it going to be kind of a typical rustification joint that's 1 inch wide and 45s
Probably.
levels in?
Yeah.
Like we see.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I don't want to make it out to more than it is.
Sure.
It will be a subtle sort of expression. I think, you know, the way this sort of reads with just sort of these lines, and, you know, we have them repeating. They're at every floor to help articulate where that floor is. Part of it's from a constructability standpoint. If there's going to be movement in the building, it's going to be at the floor joints. But then there will also be reoccurring at the heads of the window, and then at every so often vertically as well. And so we've composed those to be part of the architecture. Before I move on to the garage, any other questions about the building? Okay.
No more questions about the building.
So I think this image, at least from a color and a materiality standpoint, does a good job representing the materials. So this perforated metal panel is what we envision using as the railing balconies. And it does a couple things. What we like about it is it's It's not solid. There's sort of a transparency to it that lets light in, lets light out. So I think the balconies will read different at day and night. Somebody in their apartment will be able to look out. Likewise, the garage, while I think some of the earlier images that rendered the metal panels almost black felt really heavy, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think the goal here is to create something that's light, that takes the material from the balconies and repeats them again in this repetitive, almost vertical composition of many buildings as somebody marches down the street, not unlike single-family homes. And so that's what we've got here. Again, if you see sort of an expression, an expression, an expression, and again, conceptually, that's what repeats here. Yes, we are using a single material, but it's a different use. It's a different building. It's a garage. It's not a residential building. So we've tried to come up with a very clean expression. The last thing we've done, and what's nice about that material, is we've come up with a landscape design that will include a type of planting almost like ivy that over time will allow that to grow and sort of work its way into those holes and allow the building to become almost a living building in some ways. So it'll help over time, I think, the building mature and become part of the landscape.
Will it be the same material, though, on the parking garage?
That's exactly
It'll be
right.
the same.
Sorry. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what we've done, I mean, this is last minute, and Patty did such a great job getting some of this in, and I know we stressed her out a little bit here trying to pull some of this together. But, you know, if there was a concern about horizontal expression, here was an attempt. Literally, we would just take the panels and pull them apart. So where this really renders black, it's just because the lights aren't on in the garage, literally. There would just be complete openness or a gap in the panels. Maybe that becomes a 4-inch expression, maybe it becomes something else. Based on recent feedback, what we've done here is developed a completely different design, frankly, which we actually like better. After being beat up for years by Nigel and other professors, I believe, you know, design is better as a collaborative process, and actually some of the feedback was great. And so what we've done is taken what is, you know, the punched openings of the windows here and sort of these elements and sort of abstracted the scale and made the openings bigger. In truth, what's forming the grid here is just the precast garage. So it would be painted. We would paint it white to match the adjacent white stucco portion. We could probably work on a texture if texture was important, so it could read more like the stucco pieces. But I think to help play up the idea of reoccurring elements, you know, I think the strongest part of the design is what's going on at the corners, but also sort of these frame elements that grip the balconies together. We've used that here to highlight the entry to the garage, the main vehicular entrance for residents and visitors. And then to sort of terminate the composition along Hester Street, we've introduced one more frame element. It's just arbitrary. There obviously isn't balconies there, but it's a way, in our opinion, to tie the garage back to the apartment building.
Does anybody have any questions before I question or comment?
From the west side,
Yeah,
do
the
you
Ramsey-
see the parking garage at all, or is it covered? I can't tell from the little
So it's set
pictures.
back. The best way to sort of explain it, unfortunately, again, I apologize, there's not a floor plan on here. So I'm going to try and describe this with the cursor, I apologize, but there's sort of two courtyard buildings that front 4th Street.
Correct.
The westernmost courtyard building is pulled off the south property line by over 20 feet. And there's a service drive that comes along the back to provide access to the parking garage, which is justified in the southeast corner. So within that garage are the main utility spaces, the trash room, all those things are enclosed and concealed. And via the service drive, all that stuff is kind of removed from the public face, if you will. We've tried to get that stuff purposefully off Ramsey so that people wouldn't have to interact with that stuff or get that off the public face. So that the garage sits right here in the southeast corner with the main vehicular access off of Hester.
So you would see at least some of the garage from Ramsey.
Sure, I mean.
You'll see some of it sticking at the end
Sure.
there.
So there is a wall. Yeah, no, there's no doubt. The western face of the garage is right here at essentially the middle of the property. There's no doubt it's a 4-story building. you're going to see it. And just to be upfront, you know, those two faces of the garage are not intended to be clad. That will just be the exposed precast structure.
I personally don't like that. Nigel's not here, so I'll give my opinion.
Okay. Can we call him in? Can I phone a friend or something?
If you want to, if you want to call him and get his opinion, I don't have a problem with that.
No problem.
But I personally don't like garage design option 2.
Okay.
Looks too
That's
much.
this one? I just make sure I've got the right one up?
Yes.
Okay. Option 2, okay.
It looks too much like the prime place apartments that I live in, and I've heard significant negative comments about that parking garage and the exposed concrete on those two sides. And that many times the comment has been made, I assure your form-based code doesn't allow garages not to have a surface on all 4 sides. So when you see it, when it's sticking up in the air, even though you're a half a block away, you don't see all that ugly garage. So I'm reacting to that comment, which is coming from several different people. Between original garage design and garage design option 1, as the architect on this project, which of these two do you prefer?
I would do this one. This is more in concept with the building design itself. I mean, if I were to try and take the original intent of the building design and translate that to a different function, a different use, i.e. the garage, it would be this one. I think naturally, right, there are not going to be 40-foot long panels. So there are going to be panel joints. There are naturally going to be gaps between these panels that'll have the same subtlety as the stucco joints. So I don't think we need to force it by creating overly
At
large gaps.
OSU
We don't have
OKC
that on the
campus, we just finished up our garage about a year ago, and we had metal panels, a little bit different but very similar, that has this type of look and have gotten lots of good compliments.
building. Okay.
So I don't have a problem with this look. My problem is you got 2 sides of the garage which are exposed that you don't have these panels up. And there's no assurance that 15 years from now, these won't be the same ugly looking parking garages and won't be covered up by the next development. And that is what my concern is. In terms of the 10-foot setback to the 5th floor, I think that has been addressed in my mind, and that is not needed because you've addressed it with the setbacks. In terms of the 18-inch base, you've included that in several different areas, but not included in other areas. Don't have a problem with that. I liked the way you did the difference in materials as you're walking along, and that 1 or 2 story elevation that you've got in the glass and everything, which makes you feel, I think will make it feel like a pedestrian type scale. So after talking to the university architect, we concluded, and since he's not here, I still am concluding that in my mind, this cladding needs to be on all areas of the parking garage. So that's my comment.
I mean, what's interesting, I mean, I could let anybody else go, and I certainly don't want to derail the progress because most of those comments were excellent. Thank you, and favorable, so I don't know if I'm shooting myself in the foot or not. I mean, I think some of your comments have to do more with about how the form-based code is written, because some of your comments go beyond the extent or limits of the form-based code. I mean, the form-based code, I think, talks about primary faces facing the public way. So I understand it as a designer. I understand where you're coming from, and I don't
I also
disagree.
understand that you are asking for, you're asking for something that's not in compliance with the form-based code. I am asking for something that's not in compliance with the form-based code. Can we meet in the middle?
Okay, that's why I invite my developer to come in and we have to negotiate.
So, you know exactly where I'm coming
I
from.
appreciate that.
I'm not,
I appreciate
I'm
it.
not saying anything that,
Sure.
and so.
Thank you.
Well, I might just comment, I agree. I don't think the step back at the fifth floor is necessary. I think that would be more necessary on a taller building. I get that. I like the look of your design here, and I think you guys have done a nice job on that. You know, as far as the base goes, I'm just kind of standing here looking at the picture, sitting here. It's almost like the shrubbery creates that base
Right.
on the parking garage.
At 18 inches tall, let's be honest, right?
You know, I mean, obviously it's not brick or stone or something, you know,
Certainly.
a hard surface, but it still lends itself to creating a base, you know, visually.
Right.
So, yes, and I like that. The thing with the panel that you have too, with this original parking garage design, you're actually going to see those beams through those big holes. And so you're going to kind of get really the look that it's showing right
You'll
there.
see.
So you're going to get some horizontal lines visually through that. So, you know, I'm good with that. As far as, you know, Mike's comment on all four sides, I get that. I also understand from the developer standpoint, if it's not required, you know, obviously you don't feel like you need to do that. Mike is right. There's no guarantee that another four-story project's going to come in south of it, and you're going to see that. I agree. I don't like the look of a lot of the parking garages we have around town. My struggle is I don't know that that's something that I'm that adamant about requiring over and above the code. I get the horse trading negotiation too. So anyway,
Chicago, I get it.
you know, I'm okay with everything else. Maybe still having indecision on requiring the screening on the other side. It's just where I'm at.
I would agree with everything that's been said. I think that I don't have a problem with step back. The 18 inches lines are great. I think the design you put together is very fitting for the code and what we would like our this type of area of the city to look like. So appreciate your work on that.
And there's always one guy who just doesn't. I'm fine, and this is very, very minor. And you throw Nigel and Mr. Buchert and the rest of the crew, and I could easily be okay with the original design. For me, I must be a horizontal line guy. And again, I really, when you talk about the joints, I guess from my perspective, when I look at garage design number one, I can see the picture, I can see the horizontal lines on the building. For me, that separation with the panels just flows more for me. You did mention that you would see the beams through. I didn't really, until you mentioned it, I didn't really notice it. I mean, this just pops for me as opposed to the original design. So it's nothing I'm willing to fall on my sword for, but this just appeals to me more than the original design.
I think I concur with most of what everybody's been saying, and the cladding all the way around, even though it's not required, just because of the visually, how it's going to peek out across the place, especially when you look at the little house to the left of it, and you can see that. In terms of the expression lines, did you think of using color or anything at say 1 or 2 stories to sort of try to carry a strong, 20-foot high kind of thing versus 30, 40, 50. I'm not worried about the setback on the 5th floor, but just that you said we can't get any expression line at all except for the grout line, so to speak, on the lower levels. Was there any look at different types of colorations or things to carry across, or does that just break up all your verticality?
That was the problem. I mean, it kind of became a quilt at that point, and
Okay.
it all just kind of got so mushed together that there really wasn't a very strong overarching design concept. And, again, I still play up, and I agree, The horizontality is much more subtle along Hester and Ramsey. You know, there's no doubt Fourth Street is our primary facade, and I think when we look at this and the strong, I look at this, I see a strong horizontal line at that 20-foot elevation, you know, by a combination of what's going on at the leasing center, the retail, and then the corner elements. There's no doubt it's more subtle, but in our opinion, it was enough.
Well, I just, you know, in terms of maybe color around the windows on the second story, just like if they were, say they were blue or something, I'm not calling it. But just something that sort of, that belt, like a belt, like wearing a colorful belt around the side without doing a stripe, like you say, I understand that completely. But otherwise, the main thing is on the parking garage. I just think that it's gonna be really something that's gonna loom over things. But as far as going this way, at least it breaks it up a little bit. It's something versus just a big block. I think that people would be, even though I understand what your architecturally you're saying with your option 2, I think people would see that as just an open garage.
Would you like to state anything
You all
else?
arm wrestle now? I mean, how does that?
Here's how we go. If you're finished, then I'll ask anybody else who wants to speak on this item, either for or against. If no one wants to speak, then I'll close the public hearing, and then we will have discussion between us.
Fair enough.
And then we, hopefully we'll reach a decision tonight.
Okay.
We may or we have the right to ask anybody in the audience back up here to ask a question,
Right.
if we so desire. But it's kind of up to us at that particular point.
Fair enough. I think I've said all I want to say. Jason?
Everything has been expressed. We get into some more details during the discussion.
Sure. Or if during your all's discussion phase, if there's anything I could add,
Okay.
I'm certainly more than happy to. Okay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak either for or against this particular item? Anybody else would like to speak? Let me close the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. The alternatives are, number 1, to accept the findings and approve the proposed alternative compliance and warrant as presented. Number 2, accept findings and approve the proposed alternative compliance as amended and identified, and approve the warrant as amended and identified. Number 3, find that the alternative compliance and warrant is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impacts to the surrounding vicinity, and do not approve the request. And number 4, find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a decision, and table the request to a certain date. And what I'd like to ask you all to do is on page 2 of your report, I have the 6 items are listed there, and I'd like for you to go through each one of those and vote individually on each one, if possible. And that way we can keep them straight, they're not all clumped together as one yes or no vote or whatever. Any other questions for me?
Patty, since I guess the awnings have been removed, is that something that's gonna, I guess that's item
6.
six.
That was, that was item 6. That was
I
the
guess I don't know
warrant.
exactly
So,
what action we take on that to assure that they will stay removed.
yes.
So, whatever, Mike, you feel like we need to do there, but
So the awnings have been removed over the garage opening.
That is a question for them. The original design that shows the original vertical metal panels had those, that canopy or those rods above the garage opening. They are removing those and just leaving the panels, then that warrant can go away. That item can just go away. If they still want to incorporate those, then you'll have to vote on it, so.
So let's ask the architect
I think one less thing to vote on is probably a good thing, so I think we're comfortable removing them from the,
Okay.
striking that as a.
So you have 5 items that you can vote on.
So basically, line item 6
Yes,
Goes away.
is removed.
that goes away.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
So it's been requested that we go through each line item. We're the planning commission, we can do what we want. However, I think it would be good to go through each line item. I think I would like to go through line 1, 3, 4, 5, and then go back to number 2.
I agree.
So is there any discussion on line item number 1? Do I hear a motion on line item number 1 that we're in agreement with the alternate compliance and warrant that there is no need for a 10-foot setback on the 5th floor?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second?
Okay, since we are voting on each line item versus voting as a whole, that's the way I have the voting software set up. We'll have to just take a verbal roll call for voting.
All right.
So we'll start off that way. Item number 1, Mr. Buchert.
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rippleman?
Yes.
So we changed in midstream on you, that sounds good. Item number 3. Windows required to be 18 inches above ground level. The request is not to have that requirement. Is there any discussion or a motion?
So moved.
Yeah. To not have it, correct?
Correct.
Yes, I'll second that.
Any discussion? Let's vote.
Mr. Buchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rippleman?
Yes.
Item number 4, not to require the 18-inch base.
So
at all
moved.
locations.
Second.
No discussion? Let's vote.
Mr. Buchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rippleman?
Yes.
Item number 5 is expression lines. And there are expression lines, but they're different than what's required in our form-based code. So I want the minutes to show that the architect has provided expression lines, and I feel that it's good, but not as required as in our code. So any discussion or motion?
Well, I'd make a motion that the expression lines as showed, I would approve.
Second.
Any other discussion? Call the vote?
Mr. Buchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rippleman?
Yes.
Item number 2, the garage design. Can I call the developer up and
Let the
ask?
games begin.
I realize this is costing you more money, but not, in my opinion, not that much compared to all the costs of the project. Do you have any comment to that statement?
Forgive me for a second while I pause, because I'm trying to recall some of our most recent budget estimates as they relate to the materials themselves.
You may pause as long as you so desire.
I want to say that it was, so for that one building facade, it was in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $120,000. So while insignificant in the grand scheme of total budget, I think cladding 3 sides would start to become a little bit of a hardship. To the extent that there were opportunities for a little bit of a push and a pull between the city and the developer where there was give and a take on permit fee or a development fee or something of that nature, where we might be able to buffer that additional cost. I think that's something that we certainly.
We have no authority over permit fee
Gotcha.
or anything associated with that. I will give 2 brainstorming suggestions. Suggestion number 1, if you can get with the developer to the north, where the staff is fairly confident, there's no guarantees in this life, whatever, but if we can get a letter from the developer north that says, we have full intent to go forward with our development, and we're working towards that, and sometime within the next couple of years, our full intent is to do this development, then I don't believe this cladding is required in my mind.
Understood.
We've got the development occurring to
I
that
believe in
area.
this particular case, you mean the developer to the south,
to the
just to the
south.
south, because to the north.
The other north, south. I am the developer to the north, because I represent Oklahoma State University for the PAC. So I'm sorry, I apologize for that. To the south,
We may be able to provide a little bit of color. I don't know to what extent she's able to provide any detail, because, you know, she's beholden to, Kelly Harris is our civil engineer, and I know that she's working for both developers. And she may have input that might help you get a better concept or a better handle as to how real some of that is. I don't know that she knows that or is able to share that openly.
I don't
freely.
think tonight anyone can share that. I want something in writing. So my thought is this. My major concern is with panels on the south side. And I'm willing to vote yes for a requirement on the panels on the south and east side only, with the stipulation that the panels can go away on the south side if the staff gets a letter that they are convinced that there's a high probability the development will occur on the south.
Gotcha. I think it's challenging to tie cost on one development to intent on another. And one of the things that we've been struggling with on a number of facets with this particular development is, for example, we have off-site utility work that needs to be done to service both developments. Typically, the way that formatting works within the city structure or any city structure is that whoever is permitted first typically undertakes that effort. And then by way of a development agreement or a lease purchase agreement, which is typical in many municipalities, when another developer comes in, they then will pay their pro rata share of whatever that offsite utility cost is. And that's just by way of corollary as an example. The difficulty there, of course, though, for the starting developer, which can be a hardship, is that, for example, let's say that the offsite utility work is, let's pick a round number, $1 million. Economies change, intents change, developers change their mind or change their approach, and sometimes projects go away. Not that that's a bad thing, that's a typical facet of the development community and the way that things work economically. But in a scenario where it creates enough of a hardship for that person or that group going first, it can become a challenge. You know, to the extent that we would end up having to commit to cost based on input from another developer, I think that's pretty difficult for us to do, because up to this point, despite the wall.
Okay, then I'm going to propose that we require those panels to be on the south side, period.
Sir,
Is that a
before you
motion?
the podium, I'm sorry. Can I ask what your name is?
Sure, Jason Tompkins, Tompkins.
Thank you.
Well, if that was a motion, before we get a second, just to let y'all know, I won't support that. So I think it's personally something that wasn't required, even though I understand it's a give and take. I think it's over the top of what we ought to require, personal opinion.
I've got it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, is it like the fourth and fifth level? I mean, is it the upper parts of this that are going to peak out over the current 2-3-story housing, that where if they just did on the fourth and fifth to kind of bring it around as like a high belt line kind of a thing, and not levels 1, 2, 3 that are already going to be blocked by existing foliage? Would that satisfy you?
That would satisfy me, yes, sir.
So something along those lines, would that be more help? I mean, are you just flat again requiring anything on that south side or the west side?
Sure, and I appreciate just what you're saying, but I just don't think it's required by the code, so I don't feel right in imposing that on the developer.
I have a different issue. Again, a small issue. I think staff brought up a very good point that the only consistent material across both facilities are the metal panels that used mainly on the garage and around the balconies. I think the architect had made the offer that maybe the banding could be textured enough to kind of mimic the stucco. I think that would help us in meeting that requirement that those materials be used throughout. So it's just a...
Are you thinking about basically dressing up the south elevation with more than just concrete?
Right, well, exactly, and trying to more meet that requirement that similar materials be used. I think they brought up a very good point that the only similar materials between the two are the metal panels.
So, Rick, you're saying garage design option 2 would appear on the south side? Is that what you're inferring?
Now, no, I'm going back to the visible concrete banding, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about in order to meet more the requirement that similar materials be used on both, I think that adds more towards my approval that if there was some type of texture that mimicked the stucco on the building, that would bring the two more together. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Something other than raw concrete.
Correct.
Maybe that's an option.
Can you do the microphone since we're on TV?
Maybe can
Appreciate
do a
that.
different slide again?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oops. So
And maybe I'm just envisioning that concrete band wrong.
no, I mean, there's no doubt, you're right. Probably the design intent here is this is just the precast concrete. So where there aren't metal panels, that'll just be the exposed concrete. Likewise, on the side, it'll just be the exposed concrete. Maybe a good middle ground. It doesn't come without consequence to the developer, and it's certainly beyond what's currently shown in the design or in the documents, but maybe would be to paint these exposed concrete surfaces both on the public side, so that it, in color and texture, matches the stucco, and maybe that's something they could quantify and we could have the contractor look at applying to the south side as well. I'm thinking out loud, he'll hold me out back later.
Does that mean the metal panels go away?
No.
Yes,
On the south side.
on the south
Is
side,
that what you're thinking?
on the south
So
side.
the metal panels
I'm taking this
on the
design,
east side,
our proposed design, and enhancing it.
Stay.
and then, so the east side remains like that look.
With the addition of
With the addition,
the open, see where the opening bays are?
And that be painted white.
yes,
And then on the other two sides, we paint the concrete white.
white.
I will go with that one.
I could get behind that.
Make sure I didn't get fired.
And that's how we go through
That's right.
to having this discussion.
Sure.
So I think that'll look good enough where you see that, okay. So that's why I went to,
It'll certainly dress it up. I mean, there's no doubt, the precast garages you're used to seeing.
Yep.
it'll be dressed up on the side. Okay, I'm for that. Thank you, Rick, I appreciate that. Is that a motion?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Call the vote.
Mr. Bucher?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Yes.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rickelman?
Yes.
Addie, does that cover everything for item 2A that we need to cover?
I believe you have covered everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 3, approval of regular meeting summary of March 1st, 2016.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right.
Motion passes. Next planning commission meeting is April 5th, 2016. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Two motions and a second.
And I stopped it, so we'll take a verbal vote.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm too quick. Mr. Bucher?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Mr. Marlar?
Absolutely.
Mr. Kresiak?
Yes.
Mr. Rickelman?
Yes.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.